This is Bloomberg Markets. I'm Amber Canmore with Shonali Bosick. Time now for Stock of the Hour. We're watching shares of Boeing, which is set for the biggest intraday drop since October 2022 after a panel blew out of a brand new Alaska Airlines jet mid-flight, causing a temporary grounding of some 737 MAX jets. Bloomberg Intelligence senior airline analyst George Ferguson is joining us now with some perspective. George, obviously, thankfully, there were no fatalities or serious injuries. For investors, they now need to ask the question, what happens next? How far does this spread beyond the fleet of jets in question? How do you think about that question?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. So when we look at the video of the panel, breakaway, it looked pretty clean. So it looked to be, right around where typically a spare door may go, an exit door in the airplane. So it really feels to us like it was probably a fastener that either wasn't fastened correctly or failed. And so I think if you're an investor and you're thinking about what this means for Boeing, I think if you had more of a structural problem with the airplane, you'd be concerned that they would have to, go through a series of FAA examinations and perhaps rejiggering the airplane, which would take a considerable amount of time and might interrupt their ability to deliver airplanes this year. But the way it looks to us, it looks like it's a manufacturing defect. And in that case, I think there's probably a really strong potential that it's an anomaly, a one-off event, and that Boeing could probably deliver as many airplanes this year as they originally planned to do.
What's the process moving forward here for how Boeing looks at what had happened with this aircraft?
Yeah, so the process is going to be led by the National Transportation Safety Board. Right? They and the FAA will look at the evidence on the airplane. Then they'll look at the existing fleet of 737-9s. And once they figure out why they thought it happened, they'll try to figure out if it's prevalent in any other airplanes in the fleet. And then I think they'll be ready to sign off on what the fix is. Again, I think our guess is if it's an anomaly, it could be something that they could have their hands around really within a week or so. There are only 225 or so of those 737-9s in the global fleet right now, most of them in the U.S. being flown by United and by Alaska. So it ought to be something that they can get their arms around pretty quickly. If it's spread to the broader MAX fleet, which there's another 1,100 of in the world, that would be a much bigger problem if we went to inspections on those aircraft. But right now we don't see that.
If you're just an everyday person, you hear about the two deadly crashes that they had nearly 5 years ago. You're now hearing about this issue. There's a lot that needs to be done to instill confidence, right, in ultimately the flyers and the buyers of these jets. How do you answer, or how did they go about answering, whether this is a systemic issue with their suppliers, with their processes?
Yeah, so I'd like to say it isn't a systemic issue, but I think it is, right? So, I would say that the crashes were distinctly different, and they were a function of a change in the systems in the airplane. And now that we're sort of past that, these issues lately are more manufacturing issues, and a lot of them go back to their supplier, Spirit AeroSystems. So I think they're less challenging problems now, but they're more nagging because we're seeing more of these anomaly, one-off problems here and there. They had vertical stabilizer problems. They had rear pressure bulkhead problems, last year. And so those are sort of nagging manufacturing problems that I think Boeing and their supplier, Spirit AeroSystems, really need to get a handle on and put behind them to give buyers of aircraft confidence and give the flyers of those airplanes confidence. I will tell you that Boeing has much less of a backlog for the 737 than Airbus does for the A320, which is the competitor to the airplane. So one of the silver linings for Boeing here is if you want an airplane in the next 5 or 6 years for a narrow body, you have to go to Boeing. But they really need to put this behind them to rebuild confidence in the marketplace.
George, thanks so much for that perspective. That's George Ferguson joining us, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Airline Analyst. We're going to take a quick break now.